Everybody's ready? Marcia, you okay?
I'm great. Let's go for
Good.
it.
All
Yeah.
right. It's great to see everybody on our Zoom meeting this afternoon. It's Thursday, March 13th, 2025. This is our meeting for the Wasatch Front Economic Development District. I'm Commissioner Gage for. I'll be conducting the meeting by Zoom this afternoon. We're going to start this meeting with a welcome to our new members. I don't know if everybody's checked the list, but we've got some new members. We've made some changes to the composition of the committee. But as you may be aware, based on the WFEDD bylaws, we're required to ratify the development district's new appointments and the chair and vice chair, part of those that have been appointed by the full standing committee of the WFRC. So both myself and Mayor Wynn, is Mayor Wynn on? Do I see her?
She hasn't hasn't joined yet, but I believe there she is.
There she is. So Mayor Wynn and myself were asked to serve in these positions again. But they do need to be ratified by this committee. So now's your time if you wanted to chair or vice chair this committee to step up, or be happy to take a motion to appoint myself and Mayor Wynn as the chair and vice chair for this coming year. So
moved. John Crofts.
we have a motion. We have a second.
Second, Chris Sloan.
Thank you for that. All those in favor, please signify or say aye. Any
Aye.
opposed? I'm going to rule the motion carries. Thank you very much. Congratulations, Mayor Wynn. I guess nobody wants our job. All right. The other thing we need to do for keep our business in line is I'd accept a motion for the meeting that was held on December 13th, 2024. Seems like a long time ago, but it really wasn't. So hopefully you reviewed those, and we'd look for a motion to approve those minutes.
I'll make a motion. Gage, John Crofts, to approve.
Okay. Thank you. We have a motion from Mr. Crofts. We have a second.
I'll second that, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I believe that was Mr. Sloan. Okay. It took a little while. All those in favor, please say aye. Approve the minutes of December 13th.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, I'm going to rule the motion carries. Let's go next to our chair report.
Excuse me,
I'd like-
Commissioner.
Yes.
Could I read the names of the
Oh.
attendees in for the record, please?
Oh, yeah, sorry. I skipped over that. Let's go back to Andrea. So she's going to make note of those in attendance. So go ahead, Andrea.
Okay,
Sorry for
thank you.
skipping over you.
that's okay. Today for our WFEDD meeting, we have Marcia White, Gage Forer, Chris Sloan, Dave Mon, Meg Padgen, Jake Maxwell, Debbie Wynn, Raylene Blocker, Elvon Farrell, Matt Ryan, Nick Fritz, Gwen Kervin, Mary Catherine Perry, Sarah Tolliver, Forrest with GOPB, Christy Dahlberg, Jordan Chandler, Madison Aviles, Bryce Wurtzbaugh, John Crofts, Victoria Petro, Muriel Sochimel, Sean Milne, Jason Godfrey, Jared Stewart, Byron Head, Kent Anderson, Stephanie Eastburn, apologies, Chanel Flores, and Kirsten Swinyard. Thanks, Commissioner.
Thank you, Andrew, for doing that. Okay, I think we got everybody that's online registered in. Thank you very much. Okay, now we'll go to the chair's report, if that's okay. And I'm going to turn my time over to Marcia White, who's going to give us an update and time frame of the annual SIDS report and that the EDA requires. So I'm going to turn that report over to Marcia.
Yeah, I'll be quick. Just a really quick note. Ken Anderson wanted to make a comment that his name is spelled incorrectly in the minutes. And so if we can update that for our records, that would be great.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yep. So just really quick, we did our SEDS, or our Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy, almost a year ago, or a little over a year ago. And one of the things that I said to you early on is that we were going to do a comprehensive economic development strategy and not just provide outputs, but really trying to bridge the gap between outputs and outcomes. And so many of you who were around at that time, and thank you for helping shape the SEDS, you know that we have 4 key strategies. There were 13 strategy recommendations, and then there are 43 individual tasks. And each one of them has a priority of year, and many of them have priorities over all 5 years. And so one of the things that I thought would be beneficial is not just to say that we are doing a good job, but also show you that we're doing a good job, or I think that we are doing a good job. And so since February, I've been working on trying to come up with an annual report that will coincide with the EDA's recommended or required. They make us do a required annual report. The annual report for the EDA is so much different than even identifying how we're doing on our tasks, but I'm going to try to group it all into one document so that you will be able to look at that. So I just wanted to let you know that sometime in April, you'll be getting or receiving an annual report from me or the WFRC WFEDD, and yeah, open to feedback and some direction if we're not going in the right direction. But just wanted to share with you that not only are we going to fulfill what the EDA is requiring, but maybe going one step further to an annual report. So that's all I was going to say. I just want you to know that we did engage Better City to help us with the the strategy plan, and they are continuing to help us with a dynamic dashboard, as well as helping me with some of our graphs, not graphics, but some of our graphs and updating. The one difficulty that I'm finding is that just in a very short time frame, there are actually a few of the outcomes or outputs that we were measuring that are not available anymore. So we have been looking at some other options to go forward on. The federal government decided not to track some of the things that we were tracking at that level. So we'll note that as well. But I just wanted you to know you'll be getting something in April or early May, because I don't have to get it to the EDA until the end of April. So hopefully we'll have it to you before then.
Great. Any questions for Marcia? Appreciate your work on that, Marcia. Any questions? I also see Jason Godfrey from Better Cities. Jason, did you have anything that you'd like to add to Marcia's presentation? Maybe he's not.
Maybe he's not. He's really not listening.
Maybe he's not listening. Okay, let's keep going here. So let's go to public comments. Do we have any members of the public that are online today that would like to make a comment, questions? Now's your opportunity to do so. Any hands going up, Andrea? I don't see any on my end.
No hands, no chats.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to move off of public comments. Let's go now to agenda item 4, which is basically a recap of our schedule for 2025. I believe that Marcia sent out a questionnaire, possibly asking for your input as committee members, what you would like to see, what type of subject issues you'd like to see covered for this coming year. And I'm going to have Marcia go through the presentation, the slide presentation, and then ask for your comments. Be prepared. Any suggestions you have, now's the opportunity with this agenda item to cover those. So Marcia, do you want to go through that survey?
Yeah, thanks, Commissioner. Yeah.
Then we can have that discussion.
Yeah, that'd be great. I'm going to share my screen real quick. So we're all super familiar with how a Slido works. If I can get to the, if I can get to the front of the Slido, maybe I should start with that one. Let me go back to there. And everybody read their email, right? So they're really ready to go.
I'm sure you're gonna have a lot of comments here in just a few minutes.
Okay. Very good. There, let me get it shared here. So let's try that again. Sorry about that. Let's start from the beginning. So one of the things that I wanted to do is try to get some feedback from the group. You know, we've done our SEDS. We have a lot of information coming. We try to structure our meetings with 2 or 3 informational items and centering around these 4 key areas, which are the key strategies of our SEDS. So promoting city and town centers, economic development capacity, human capital, and then development. So with that, if you guys can pull out your phones, because this is always the fun part, and have tried to come up with some questions, and hopefully you were able to kind of give some thought to how you would like to see this this structured in maybe the next year, or even 2. I'm putting agendas out for almost 1.5 years out, so, or thoughts on drafts. So the first question is, we have a lot of these meetings. Do you prefer them in person, virtually, or hybrid? I'm pretty sure that it's Sean that wants to stay in his PJs. So Sean, I'm gonna give you a hard time. So a lot of people like virtual. That's awesome. And it's hard to keep, I think, sometimes our interests. So that makes me think that between virtual and in person, and maybe, or hybrid, and then maybe even trying to do a little bit of mix of both would be great. I don't want to stop anyone's voting, but I also don't want to slow us down either. I'll go to the next couple of questions. There it goes. So again, I talked a lot about, we're trying to be informational about around those 4 key strategies. And so what topics would you like to see presented at upcoming meetings? I see people typing. There we go. I'm pretty sure that I know who wrote 337 or 249. I'm just kidding. That's great. We're going to talk about that today, so that's awesome. You can keep, there's still a few people typing, but
Marcia,
yes.
if I may, maybe if anyone, while we're getting these answers, if anyone wants to unmute and just speak to their answer or give us more info, that'd be good. Some of these are awesome ideas. I want to know more about what you're thinking.
That'd be good to hear from, so we have a little more detail.
Hey, Marcia, Chris Roybal, can I make a comment?
Hey, Chris, how? Yeah.
Yeah, I apologize. I'm on the road driving, so I can't see my screen and I can't type. But for next year, selfishly on the economic development side, I'm not sure if it's already been written there, but obviously a lot of discussion around infrastructure, whether we have shovel-ready sites, what do the utilities look like? Obviously, power and water are big issues. So anything related to infrastructure, I know that's a big gorilla to kind of tackle, but it tends to be either a big help or a big hindrance to getting projects done. So that would be something I'd love to see this group, dive into a little deeper.
I would second that, Marcia. Thanks, Chris, for bringing that up. It might even be nice to have some of our reps attend some of the meetings and actually talk about where they're at as it relates to their development processes. We recently had a really great meeting with Rocky Mountain Power, and they actually went over kind of where they're at with their goals as it relates to Northern Utah, and then provided some information to us on how we could actually do some partnership projects. So yeah, I think Chris is right on track with that.
Great comments.
This is Raylene, Commissioner Blocker from Morgan County.
Hi, Commissioner.
Hello. So I'm interested so I represent Mountain Green area. And as you know, we don't have a downtown, but we're in the process of developing a downtown with 4 different developers. So I'd like to get more information on, how to create a great downtown that's pedestrian friendly, that's more outdoorish. Just that, that's what my area is right now. So that's what's interesting me.
Great. And all of those play into, our key anchors or our key strategies. So that's great. Let me just keep going through here. And so one of the things that I thought of is, would you be interested in site visits or field trips? And that can be anywhere. And it doesn't have to be around, it doesn't have to be a mobile tour or anything like that. It could be meeting at an entrepreneur site or a food hall or something, or, anything where it's trying to be entrepreneur related or innovation or Department of Defense or anything like that. I just wondered if anybody would be interested in looking at that.
And tell us if you're interested in hosting as well, if you have something you want to show us.
Thanks for throwing that in. Yeah. Well, let me keep going here. And excuse me, are there specific speakers or subject matter experts or organizations you'd like to hear from? I get to hear a lot from different places, but I don't hear of everything. And I know Stephanie in Weber County has put together a really nice symposium next week, and are bringing in a nice speaker. But are there speakers or people that you've heard of, or hopefully that they would do it for free? That was kind of tongue in cheek, but I don't know who did that, just said that about the best practices for RFI submissions, but I'd be curious where that starts. Does that just mean that you're submitting them and you're not getting them, or
So we recently were able to get some amendments to the PID legislation. Jerry Stevenson ran that for us, and in conjunction with Gilmore Bell, they might be a fantastic speaker to have come and talk about PIDs. and the recent amendments that were added to those. I think it'd be really beneficial for everybody. And they would do it for free.
Small donation to their campaign. I'm kidding again. I should not kid. Hmm,
Good to know.
mhm.
So Marcia, would you like to read the chat out loud? I know some people.
Oh, I
are-
don't see the chat. Thank you. Yes. Andrea, I have it. It's hard for me to read it out loud. If you could do that, that would be great because I don't.
Certainly. Certainly, Gerard Stork replies, ADC Utah can help with an RFI best practices. I believe we have a training plan this year. And then he says, reach out for details.
That's great.
And we can tailor our follow-up email with more of this information and contact information so that if people think of things, they can shoot them back to you
Thank you.
after this meeting.
Yeah, and I'll send out the survey results as well, and then we can kind of, if you have more comments or thoughts to that. Let me go on to the next question real quick. So I'm just trying to figure out the best way to learn. So one of the things that grant funding, or I think funding opportunities, came up in a previous as a previous answer, and I'd never know quite how to let people know, whether that's through emails or newsletters or podcasts, or so I don't, that sometimes we get our inboxes get a lot of newsletters, so I didn't know if that was the best route to go. And newsletters seem to be almost, maybe it's a combination of both. So newsletters seem to be, monthly or every other month kind of thing. And so when important things happen, I would love to be able to send out an email. But I don't want to inundate your inboxes either, so. I don't even know I don't know why I put podcasts on there, because I don't even know where to begin with one, but I'm sure that would be a really fun thing to do. Let me move on. So we get pretty good board participation, and I really appreciate that. I mean, this is one example of really good feedback, but is there something else that we could be doing? As you know, we fall under the umbrella of WFRC, so we've got Miranda and Andrew up at the Capitol, and then we've got a bunch of our team, whether that's Meg or whether that's Julie from our team, working to try to, with some individual bills, but I don't know if there's things that we could be doing differently just as a WFEDD board. What would a weekly briefing look like? I'm just curious. Whoever said that, I just am curious what that pay us money. That came from Sean. What would a weekly briefing look like? Just something similar that we do during the session, or is that an economic development specific? I don't know who said that, so it's all anonymous. I should have made you write your names down. Great. Those are great comments. Thank you. one more. I'll work on the entertaining and informative. Does that mean I have to start it out with a joke?
Make it more entertaining. Yeah, I like it.
And the last thing I want to do is talk a little bit about our SEDS and just, again, I'll just reiterate our top ones of promoting city and town centers, economic development capacity, human capital development, and diverse business environment. And you know that we have several tasks that we are working through, but we want to make sure that we are aligning or actually helping with your work and not necessarily against it. So I'm just trying to figuring out if whoops, sorry, I see people were still voting. And then it's always a little bit of a conundrum on my part because we service five and a few regions, 5.5. I'm gonna throw Box Elder in there, and trying to figure out ideally what is the role that we can play. I don't know necessarily if it's a role of telling you what you can and cannot put in your cities or counties, but we've elevated it to a different role. And so I just want to see if we are still on the same page. I don't want to, I think I'll keep the poll open in case you guys want to come back to it, or if you think of other things, but that's my last question. And I really, I really thank you. I mean, I know that, you know, this is always, I'm always a little bit worried and nervous about asking if we're doing the right thing. But I'm hoping that, anything that you give me as far as constructive, you know, not criticism, I guess you can criticize me too, but anything constructive that we can do better, or do differently. We're really wanting this to be an organization where we can help and make sure that you guys are getting what you need. And so thank you for that time. And Chair Farrar, I'm just going to turn it back to you and stop sharing, but I'll leave the Slido open for a little while and we'll go from there.
Great, thanks. Great questions. And I really appreciate the responses, especially when we talk about, you know, what's the job of the Wasatch Front Regional Council. And I saw the word advocate up there quite a bit. And I think we're going to get into a legislative update here in the next couple of minutes. But I think if anything became clear after this year's session is that we really need to be together in terms of advocating for economic growth, making sure that the state understands that these decisions are best made at the local level, whether that be city or county. And that you know, we're on top of this, and maybe WFRC needs to take a more active role along with the league and along with UAC in making sure that we communicate that with our legislators. So some of these bills may be taken off the shelf before they become reality. I think we had a little taste of that this year, and advocate's a great word. And I think that's something that we should pay attention to. Unfortunately, it's where we only meet every 3 months. We need to maybe that's, and I saw the suggestion up there for a task force. Maybe we should consider a task force of this committee, Marcia, to look at issues with the cross section of this committee and be prepared to take that to the Hill for next year. So anyway, appreciate the survey, and I like the answers. And by the way, if you have anything that comes to mind or you didn't want to discuss it today, I'd encourage you to reach out to Marcia, myself, Mayor Nguyen, send us an email, a phone call. We really want this committee engaged with making decisions, through this year, and you really become the focal point of making that happen. So thanks very much. Marcia, do you have anything else?
No, Commissioner, I think that's great. And I did, there were quite a few answers there that I think we will try to incorporate in this next year. So thank you, everybody, for participating.
Yeah, thanks. And if anybody has suggestions, one of the questions was speakers. If anybody has suggestions on speakers that come to mind before our next meeting, shoot them out to Marcia. We're always looking to make sure that this committee has the most up-to-date information, accurate information that they can take back to their communities and put to work. So that's how I see it working for all of us. So thanks very much for your participation in that. Now, as I mentioned before, we're going to look at the 2025 legislative recap. The legislator just adjourned here a week or so ago, and we're fortunate to have a couple of well-informed people with us to give us a breakdown of actually what took place and what the impacts may be. So I'm going to ask Miranda Jones-Cox, I believe, is with us. And we also have with us Mary Catherine Perry from the Salt Lake Chamber. And we're going to ask them to give us a quick review of legislation that dealt with economic development that may impact our individual communities. So I don't know who wants to start, whether that's Miranda or Mary Catherine Perry. Go ahead and jump on.
Okay, perfect. Miranda and I are going to kind of tag team this, but I'll just kick it off a little bit. Just by way of introduction, I am the new Vice President for Public Policy and Government Affairs at the Salt Lake Chamber. I started on December 2nd, so had a short on-ramp into the session, but with the chamber anyway, but not a stranger to the Hill. I started my career in the Office of Legislative Research and General Counsel as a policy analyst there. Got to know the legislature, the process, strategies that worked, strategies that didn't work. I watched it for many years, and then more recently had been doing advocacy work with the legislature through the Period Project, the Teen Center Project, doing government affairs work there. So I'm thrilled to be here. I'm so grateful to WFRC. I loved seeing Miranda and Andrew up there on the Hill. As we look at what happened, I loved how you said that, like, we're going to talk about what just happened. I mean, we all know it's 45 days of, some really fast-paced policy work. There were, I think, 959 bills numbered, and in the end, 582 bills passed. But if you look at the substantive ones, rarely do you see a bill that passed in its original form. So on top of 582, we're talking about multiple substitute bills. So every day it was trying to figure out, how did this bill change? What does that mean for our groups, for our communities? The ball bouncing back and forth of which side is more concerned over the substitute. Is it local government? Is it state government? Is it the business community? Is it economic development? Whatever it is, it was just a lot going on. And so I'm always so grateful to have wonderful, reliable partners up there on the Hill as the chamber's doing those things, and knowing that Wasatch Front Regional Council is watching out so closely on so many of these issues. I'm going to go ahead. I can share, or should I try? Let's see, I can try and do that.
it might be easier for you to drive your slides, but if
Let's
you can't,
see.
we can.
Yeah, if you're unable to do it, I'm happy to pull it up.
Do you mind? I think I might have to go through a setting up scenario as I'm looking through this now.
Can you see that right screen?
Perfect. Perfect. So as I kind of looked at the legislature as a whole, kind of as the dust was settling, what I noticed, kind of my unofficial theme, is new paths forward. I felt like there were so many new paths when it came to how we approach higher education, how we approach energy, how we approach, economic development, just even how we approach the relationship between the state of Utah and Salt Lake City or local governments. There were just a lot of new paths. Whether you consider them better paths or worse paths or whatever they are, I'll let you kind of decide, because as associations and groups, we have a lot of opinions about how those paths look. There were just a lot of new paths. So we'll just go to the next slide, and I'm just going to give kind of a high-level overview of what we saw as a chamber, but as a lot of communities and groups were seeing. For example, one of those new paths was energy. We supported policies that provided safeguards for new energy exploration and opportunities, as well as policies that consider existing ratepayers when offering energy to new customers. I will just say, as a chamber, we have members all over the place on energy that don't always agree. And so this was an interesting conversation as we were moving forward. House Bill 249, nuclear power amendments by Representative Carl Albrecht, creates the Nuclear Energy Consortium. And then it had kind of this Utah Energy Council with a process for designating electrical energy development zones. And so there would be a property tax differential in this bill to use to fund electrical energy infrastructure development. Projects that would be possible. So in addition to exploring nuclear energy, which might be, years down the road, this would also be able to help fund projects that would be ones that primarily could be turned on and off as needed. So coal, natural gas, geothermal, and anything that could provide power 24/7, basically. And then SB 132, electric utility amendments, was one of two really kind of competing Senate bills. It was very interesting. Senator Cullimore had one going out there and exploring our relationship with the state's utility and how we approach particularly large load users, so data centers, AI, things like that. How will that energy be provided? How will the cost be distributed? And in the end, SB 132 provided that pathway for particularly large load customers to come to the utility, and then to consider and have those large load customers pay for their energy while protecting essentially existing ratepayers, so that the cost won't be spread across everyone, but those customers will be paying for those larger loads that they demand for their businesses. Okay, so the next slide. Housing. There were quite a few housing bills. I mean, and within all of these, I just chose a couple. There are so many bills out there under all of these umbrellas, but we supported policies that streamlined those regulations for zoning, reducing bureaucracy, and allowing developers to be innovative in their approach to increasing housing supply and reducing costs. We know this has been a huge priority for our legislature, for our governor. The first bill, House Bill 368, local land use amendments, streamlines municipal annexation and boundary adjustments to ensure that cities and developers comply with land use and infrastructure regulation. And it also shortens the timeline for identical building plan approvals. And then SB 181, housing affordability amendments, allowed some creativity kind of in reducing costs. So this one would address Utah's supply of affordable housing by easing restrictions on municipality issued parking requirements, so that a home wouldn't necessarily have to have a garage ready to go. Like, how can we reduce the cost? I will say I bought my first house at 15th and 15th, and the garage was a little red barn in the backyard. Not able to really park a car in there. A lot of us who live along the Wasatch Front, or particularly in Salt Lake City, I didn't have covered parking for a really long time. So these are just some options that the state is looking at as we look at how to increase housing. Okay, next slide. Another new path here was public safety and homelessness and how the state approaches this. There were a couple, and we honestly, we believe that there needs to be not just a balance, but full engagement on both enforcement of public safety, but also addressing services for those who are struggling, vulnerable, homeless, and need those supports. So there were two bills particularly that we were looking at. House Bill 329, that one actually went through a lot of significant changes to where it actually became passable, but that was homeless services amendments. That creates the Shelter Counties Advisory Board. And also as part of the Utah Homeless Services Board, it added a member on that board that needs to have a lived experience with homelessness to provide that perspective. It improves data collection, sets safety standards for shelters, for example, a zero tolerance policy when it comes to drug use inside those shelters, and then allows funds to support transportation for individuals reconnecting with support networks outside. And then also House Bill 167 would improve the rehabilitation and reintegration of individuals who are on probation and parole or reentering society by enhancing mental health support, expanding access to county services, reducing employment barriers. So another pathway for them to getting back to work and to reintegrating into society, realizing that that is not just, the transition is not easy. And it requires, for success, it requires some investment there in that transition period. The other bill I wanted to talk to you to just mention briefly was public safety amendments. That was House Bill 465. That was the one that kind of changed the relationship with public safety between the state and Salt Lake City in particular. As you know, Chief Brown has left the Salt Lake City PD, and Mayor Mendenhall has asked Chief Brian Redd to step in. Now he is the chief of police there. He has a lot of experience in this area and serving as a police officer and more recently as the head of the Department of Corrections for the state of Utah. He has been going around. I've seen him at multiple events too, introducing himself, giving his cell phone number, very approachable, ready to take this on. And he knows it'll be challenging, but this bill creates an interagency agreement between the Department of Public Safety and local cities of the first class that receive homeless mitigation funds. So Salt Lake City, St. George, they will be required now to enter into this interagency agreement where together they set up standards, what success looks like, and how they'll partner to take care of some of these really challenging problems when it comes to public safety. The initial bill was quite different too, because it threatened the withdrawal or the reallocation of homeless mitigation funds as well as transportation funds if the city was unable to deliver on its plan. Just backing up, as we know, Speaker, President, and the governor asked Mayor Mendenhall to present a public safety plan back in January. She did that. It was a 27-point plan. It was very comprehensive, but this is what the state would call kind of the insurance or the plan to help execute that with the city. And so this also has an eminent domain portion that was added into the bill that would allow unincorporated parts of the city to be designated as a homeless shelter. The next slide. I know I'm going through these really quickly. Miranda's got some amazing things to add too, but I'm just going to kind of breeze through these as well. Education and workforce, very important to economic development and kind of our the health, and one of those pillars of our state is how we educate and prepare our workforce to be ready to contribute. The first bill, House Bill 106, a critical element to the workforce, we believe, is offering childcare and the child tax credit. And the child care tax credit for businesses offering employer provided childcare were both wrapped into House Bill 106, which is the income tax bill as well. And then House Bill 447 was really Speaker Schultz's kind of centerpiece for his workforce development initiative, which gave grant money for school districts to implement a Catalyst campus model for their high schools, for their K through 12 schools, which is basically a hands-on kind of state-of-the-art laboratory. I don't know if any of you have ever seen one. Davis has one. I know Jordan School District has them. There are some in the state, but it really prepares students to graduate high school and be prepared to work on day one. So this is an investment in one of the pathways for workforce development, but also in supporting higher education. The Chamber also believes that is a very essential and needed pathway. That Talent Connect Bill, SB 162, creates the Utah High Demand Talent Portal to connect employers with qualified individuals from higher education institutions and recent graduates for high wage employment opportunities. And then our last one, I think, is the economic development. So from the Chamber's perspective, I will just say we held several meetings on the Hill with legislative leadership and the governor to promote a coordinated economic development path forward. We know that there are a lot of economic development initiatives, groups out there, and we're hoping to see a coordinated effort and see that those who are looking at Utah from the outside or even looking at other sites within Utah to expand, that there's a clear path, that there's kind of contact points that they can easily identify and move forward with. So with that, I'm going to just take SB 337 for just a second, and then Miranda's going to jump in on the second one. We all kind of heard about in that last week and a half, SB 337, Senator Collimore's land use and development amendments. This was big and bold. It created the Beehive Development Agency, which would have had oh, and by the way, this bill was 108 pages long. It was big, it was comprehensive. But the Beehive Development Agency would have had 5 members, 3 appointed by the governor, 1 by the speaker, 1 by the president, and then also an economic development coordinating council, essentially. So it would have had the governor or the governor's designee, the president of the Senate or designee speaker, same thing, but also a CEO and members appointed by some of these other authority boards. So MIDA, Point of the Mountain, Inland Port, Fair Park area, and also this Beehive Development Agency, and would have land use authority in terms of large-scale projects. It did not go very far. It barely made it out of its Senate committee, and then it was circled in the Senate for the remainder of the session. As we understood, this was a bill that was the governor's bill, came out of the governor's office primarily. We don't know if it's over exactly at this point, if there will be a modified version, but we do know in House Bill 582, that does also contain other economic development policies in there. And with that, I'm happy to turn it over to Miranda to take over and take us through that one and much more.
Thanks, Mary Catherine. Well, and I want to share that Mary Catherine really is a great addition to the chamber, and the chamber and its members are really lucky to have her. It was a great legislative session, and there's a lot going on up at the Hill. Her and I have joked that, we're now in like the roadshow period of legislative session where we're constantly giving presentations now about what happened, which is really fun to reflect on. But even today, there's still things where I'm like, oh wow, I missed that, or there's this little Easter egg in that bill. And so we're still trying to figure out exactly what happened during session. But I think Jordan's going to run my slides. I'm just going to add on a few other specific bills that I thought were worth noting. And while we're teeing that up, Commissioner Frower, I just wanted to respond to something that you said earlier, and the role that WFEDD should have moving forward. And you had mentioned, what more can WFRC do in terms of advocacy up on the Hill related to economic development. And so I just want to note that, like, I hear you, and that's, something that, we can make sure that we're continuing to look for more opportunities in that moving forward. So just wanted to recognize that.
Thanks very much, Miranda. That's good to hear.
And along that same line, Jordan, if you want to hit the next slide, I'll first talk about HB 542, noted on Mary Catherine's slide. This is an economic development amendment bill by Representative Hawkins, and there are a few specific things that it did that I think are notable for this group to know. And the first thing is that it repeals the Unified Economic Opportunity Commission. We've talked at length about the UEOC over the past few years, and I know that some of our local members have been involved in the UEOC as the local county or city representative. And really, the UEOC played a role in developing the state's economic development strategy and looking at and digging into some of these policy areas that maybe we don't always get the chance to dive down deep into. And we did see some really great outcomes and recommendations from the UEOC. I think one of the reasons why it is being repealed now is because it started to maybe conflict a little bit with legislative interim. So the legislature's legislative policy making and study process. And I think some maybe saw that those came into conflict a little bit. And then others maybe just argued that it kind of outlived its life, if you will, that, what UEOC had to contribute, it did. And so now what's those next steps moving forward as far as the state's economic development strategy? And so with that, this bill goes into detail on adding some new requirements for the Governor's Office of Economic Opportunity to do as they develop the statewide economic development strategy. Performance metrics, ensuring that there's targeted industry strategy determined. One of the things that I thought was really interesting was they're now being asked to analyze long-term population and economic growth and plan for anticipated impacts. You could argue they're already doing some of these things, but spelling it out in statute to be a little more clear on what their role is, I think, is important. Notably, aligning economic development strategy with the statewide water strategy. This is something that we had talked about really for years with the UEOC and in other venues, along with the Governor's Office of Planning and Budget. Laura Hansen has kind of been pushing for this for some time, but making sure that the incentives that we give and the companies that we attract into our state are aligned with the water that we have available and really the statewide water strategy. So that's another really great addition. And then also ensuring that economic development efforts are targeted at not only our urban areas, but to rural Utah, which, again, arguably we're already doing these things at GOEO, but spelled out more explicitly. And then lastly, it moves some broadband responsibilities under the Utah Department of Transportation. So just wanted to note that there for those interested in broadband. Jordan, next slide, please. I'll hit two more bills that I think are worth noting. This one is SB 195. And sorry, I'll preface this by saying my comments here, of course, focus more towards the economic development related bills. There's a whole slew of other more specifically transportation related bills that I'm not really going to get into today just for sake of time. But I'll pop in the chat our comprehensive end of session summary that really digs into the details on those bills, share our appropriations tracker, and then also our bill tracker where you can find more information about the things that we were looking at and focused on this session. So I'll turn back to 195, and this bill is the Transportation Omnibus by Senator Harper, so it really has a lot of provisions in here. Notably was clarifying station area planning reporting requirements. Hopefully station area planning isn't a new concept to some here, linking economic development, land use, housing, and transportation together at our transit stations for growing in areas where it makes sense. this just clarifies how that reporting is done after those plans are adopted. Another one is requiring cities to amend general plans to identify priority transportation connections, meaning greater connectivity in our communities over what was intended in the bill was water conveyances, canals, and making sure that we're planning for those connections over these impediments. And then lastly, and this is probably what got most airtime on this bill, was that the bill would prohibit Salt Lake City specifically, from proceeding on certain transportation projects within the city unless those projects are approved by the Utah Department of Transportation in a mobility plan that where those projects are identified. And there's really a number of reasons why this came out. I don't know that we'll get into too much of that here, other than to say that there are concerns with just mobility downtown, cars being able to move downtown, the construction that's downtown, and this maybe targeting of highway reduction strategies, narrowing of lanes, removing lanes in the downtown city, caused the legislature with some concern, caused concern of some business leaders in the community. And so the idea here is that, and this really ended up in a better place than maybe it originally started, though I think it's still challenging for Salt Lake City. I think one thing that we're wanting to note here is that mobility for all transportation users is important to WFRC. So our active transportation users, our pedestrians, our drivers, our transit users. And so making sure that we're coordinating all of those efforts is important. And we think that Salt Lake City and UDOT will be able to work collaboratively in this effort. And hopefully Salt Lake City will feel like they can continue to do the road projects that they feel are needed in the capital city. And we hope this doesn't set an unfortunate precedent for other communities, that, the legislature can dictate, that certain projects should or should not be completed. And so that was partly why WFRC was engaged in this issue. And we think it ended up in a okay spot. And then lastly, I just wanted to touch on SB 26. Jordan, if you want to hit that. This bill is the Housing and Transit Reinvestment Zone bill from Senator Harper. HTRZs are hopefully not a new concept to some of you, but would allow for mixed use, multifamily developments around our transit stations, and allow for tax increment to be collected to support those types of development and that affordable housing that is required in an HTRZ. So it makes some refinements to the existing HTRZ statute, and that's where WFRC was more notably involved. Where we didn't really have any influence on was two other provisions of that bill. The first one being enabling a convention center reinvestment zone in Salt Lake City or Sandy for their convention center areas. With that is it allows for tax increment capture, and allows for a public infrastructure district to finance that zone, and basically mirrors what an HTRZ is, specifically for convention center area within Salt Lake County. On top of that, it pulls in some language that was in another convention center district bill, pop that into this bill near the end of session. So you'll see that last bill. It allows Salt Lake County to use their fourth quarter local option sales tax funding for revitalization of the Salt Lake Convention Center project area. So the convention center and then the surrounding infrastructure and proposed changes in that area. So really, on top of that, there were a number of other bills for sports entertainment districts, and I think we're really seeing a what's the right word? I think we're seeing these tax increment financing tools growing and being used for a lot of these revitalization projects. Mary Catherine mentioned, I think it was SB 337. I get all the numbers mixed up at this point, but really the state kind of coming in and playing a role and allowing, local areas to collect that tax increment to pay for these investments in these areas. So there was a number of those bills this session as well. A lot of those are linked in our bill tracker where you can find additional information. So if it hasn't been dropped in the chat already, I'll be sure to do that here. So with that, if anyone has any questions, I'm sure Mary Catherine or myself would be happy to answer them.
Any questions for our two presenters? I don't see any hands going up. Mary Catherine, Miranda, I appreciate great presentation. I appreciate the work that you do for both the chamber and obviously WFRC on the Hill. I understand, I know for a fact it's not that easy. It's a lot of hours up there that you spend that sometimes you wonder what the results or what your outcomes would be. But I know from a WFRC, and I appreciate that remark, Miranda. You and Andrew, that you wear a lot of hats up on the Hill. Transportation becomes number one, obviously, but if you toss in housing and economic development, we really look at you and look for you to carry a little more legislation in the future for us. And I appreciate you taking the opportunity to engage with the committee. So thanks very much. Seeing no other questions, let's move on with our agenda. So now we're fortunate to have with us Mr. Jake Maxfield, who is the Economic Development Department of Salt Lake City. He's going to talk to us about a project that actually originated from the SEDS study. That was a shared project with the transportation and land use funded project. He's going to talk about how this impacted Salt Lake City and how it went to really create a vibrant city center as part of downtown Salt Lake. So Jake, I believe you're with us. I'm going to turn the time over to you.
We're unable to hear you, Jake.
I see you, Jake.
All right, hoping you can hear me now.
There you go.
A little bit louder if you can.
Can you hear me now?
There, thank you.
That's better.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, we can
Yeah,
hear
you're
you.
coming in. You're coming in now, Jake. Did we lose you? There you go.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
No.
Yep.
Oh, you can?
Yep.
Great.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you so much. Let me try to share here. All right, are we seeing my presentation by chance?
We are.
Nope.
Yep.
Oh, you are. Great.
Coming up. Yep.
Okay, thank you. I'm gonna try and burn through this quickly. As mentioned, this was a project funded by Wasatch Front Regional Council. And let me just jump to this timeline really quick. We applied back in September of 2022, and it was a fundamentally different area. Much has changed since then. You'll see that second point there in January, February of 2023, when the Power District and Big League Utah announced their development plans. So the intention of our plan was initially to look at ways in which we can revitalize the area. And that has changed a bit, and we'll get into that. So the fundamental purpose was there was a lot of information out there regarding North Temple, so we really needed somebody to help us compile all that information and engage stakeholders and really assemble that point in time information so we could better understand the existing conditions. And then we wanted to also just recommend a handful of realistic economic development goals for the area that's kind of tied to the transportation and land use considerations that North Temple has and those assets that it has. So as you can see here, lots of plans touch this area. This is part of the initial problem as we started to look at what our little department can do for North Temple. And so our consultant really dug in and assembled all of the economic development considerations. And then if you're curious whether or not we tied into existing efforts, we did. But if there's anything missing from here, we would love to know about it. But one that we remain really curious about how it will turn out is this power district transportation study that Wasatch Front Regional Council is also leading. And so we'll be keeping our eyes open for that. Little timeline of some of the big investments that have occurred along the corridor. I think one of the most impactful ones that I'll note here is the Opportunity Zone creation in 2019. And we did have some limitations and challenges as we really dug in. One is that crime and safety is and likely always has been one of the #1 considerations and issues with the area for businesses. And with this legislative update we just received, that's kind of helpful in stating that we do have the intention of linking in with our safety plan as a city to see how we can try to devote some resources to the North Temple area. Kind of well before we even started our work, the Fair Park Authority divided our study area into 2 disparate areas and shrunk our RDA project area, as you may know. So that introduced some interesting challenges for us to adapt. And then internally, we had a hard time procuring our sales leakage data, which really would inform our ability to develop retail opportunities in the corridor. And then, of course, the Opportunity Zone. The area has really become very dense with housing, and we'll jump into that. So here's one visualization of that to sort of begin to understand the number of units that are going in our study area, which is really between I-15 and 215. And then to get a little more granular, these are all of the planned, permitted, or under construction projects. And if you start to assemble all of the parts here, we're looking at about 14 to 15,000 units that are kind of coming online. 6,000 of those we're speculating are going to be in the power district. I've heard a number of figures there. We're thinking 6,000 is a conservative number. I've also heard more than that. So there is a lot happening as far as housing goes. And it also has us thinking about who we're serving. So you have the existing residents of the area who have been there a long time, and now you have a lot of new residents. So that's one thing that we're really still trying to contemplate as far as what type of retail and economic development measures we take in the area. So let's jump into the recommendations. One need we heard from the business community was to really inform them on the development and how they'll be impacted to try and get ahead of it rather than having to be reactive. Another was more promotion. And so it's really trying to drive people there. But I think before we do that, we have to focus first on resolving for programming. So let's start with the task force. This would really be a person. There's precedence for this in Salt Lake City. We have it with our city construction projects. I don't know if anybody knows Bill Knowles, but he is wonderful at what he does, and he really does just kind of bridge the gap for information from what Salt Lake City is doing with construction and with our engineering department, and then how that might impact our business community. So he's out there talking to businesses to make sure that they're linked in to understand potential impacts. And then their feedback also comes back to the city so that we can work better with our business community. So it was proposed that we do something similar for North Temple because of what I just have shown with all of the housing units coming online. Another recommendation is a special assessment area or something similar to sort of pull together a business district. We're hearing that North Temple doesn't really have a sense of place. It's kind of an eclectic mix of businesses and always has been, but there is some potential for us to focus in and create a business district or to facilitate the creation of a business district. And here we have a couple of scenarios. So in red, we're really zeroing in on the cross section of North Temple and 900 West. There's a lot of potential there for retail. And then of course, another scenario could loop in the Fair Park, the Fair Park Authority. They have expressed interest in that, but I think there are some questions around what the business district will have, what types of assets they're seeking through an assessment, and do those needs in option 1 resonate with the needs of option 2. And so this is something that we're always trying to get our heads around as we manage these SAAs throughout the city, is trying to keep the assets that we receive from the assessment, make it so that it makes sense to the businesses who are contributing. The next recommendation is to maybe sublease some of our retail spaces. And I have a good picture here. We have a lot of required retail spaces in these housing developments that are sitting empty. There are multiple reasons for that, but I think with the opportunity zone, we had a lot of housing going up quickly. We had a requirement to build ground floor retail. The developers have told us, we're not retail people, so they built the simplest thing, which is just kind of basic office. But if we really want to do something meaningful here, we probably have to change use in a lot of situations. So if our CRA now, I should change the RDA acronym there. If our CRA were to master lease these spaces, then they could sublease to any tenant. And I think the stability that offers to the developer, or at least to the property owners, is attractive, and they've said that they would consider investing some tenant improvement costs to make that happen. So this allows our department the opportunities to curate the retail for this area. Just in case anyone's curious about the project area and how long it's been around and when it ends in 2038. And then this is also kind of a visualization of how the Fair Park Authority has captured a good portion of the RDA project area. So again, office space is what's there. We've demonstrated the need here to replace that with retail options. Okay, moving quickly to district node and branding. Again, this is kind of chicken or the egg for us. We want to do this in the right order of operations, and we suspect this might come later on and might be operated by the contract who runs a potential SAA if that happens. So think someone like the Downtown Alliance. This could be something that they could tackle. But yeah, mostly it's around signage, wayfinding. We have some examples of that here. And, in different parts of the city, some good opportunities to sort of infuse this into the area. Okay, now parking. This is one of the other issues for why the retail spaces might be sitting vacant. So I'll just actually skip to this picture here. You might assume that parking lot on the right is available to the retail on the left, but it's not. And so for much of the retail, there just isn't designated parking. So again, it's convenient that we just had our legislative update. Our initial consideration was to potentially close some outer lanes on North Temple during certain hours of the day. Again, there's precedence for that on West Temple and 1300 East, where we just have, you know, the ability to park in those outer lanes. So that would really open up some parking. We're hearing that we might need even more than that, but in order for these ground floor retail spaces to have a chance to be successful, we really need to figure out the parking piece as well. So that's our last recommendation. SB 195 does complicate that a bit. We would probably have to get this into a mobility plan and have this approved by UDOT. And then again, we are watching to see what happens with the Wasatch Front Regional Council plan, transportation plan, to see if volumes and anticipated uses of this stretch of the corridor, if it would be complicated by closing those outer lanes. So I know I moved fast, but again, here's just a snapshot of our, you know, handful of recommendations that we feel are very feasible for our department to deliver on. We are linking in with the mayor's advisor on homelessness and with the safety plan and everything else that we're trying to enhance our response to the crime and safety components for the area. We know that that's one big thing that we'll have to figure out as well. So with that, if there are any questions, I'm happy to take those.
Commissioner, you're muted.
Thanks for that. Appreciate that, Jake. Any questions that Jake can answer for the committee?
I'll just add, if you want the full plan, feel free to email me and I can send that over to you.
Great, thanks very much. Again, this is a good example of what that task force that's put together from the SEDS that we've done, and it's a great example of what we can do if we get together as a community and apply those principles that was discussed. So, any other questions, comments before we move on with our agenda?
Mr. Chairman, maybe a suggestion less than the comment. Rather
Yes.
than us inundating him with 40 emails, is there any way we could just have one email sent to staff and have that sent to all of us?
I'm sure we could. Jake, could
That
you
sounds
send
like
that
a great plan. Thank you.
You send that to Andrea, she can pass it on. Thanks, Chris, for that suggestion. Yeah. All right. Marcia, anything else before we move on?
No, Commissioner, yeah, one of the things that we continue to try to show is that intersection between what we're doing with transportation, land use, and economic development. And this was one of those good TLC funded projects that you know, became that, but it also became a pivot in the middle of it. So, you know, thank you for sharing with us, Jake. And I don't know if Christy, you worked as a project manager. Is there anything else you'd want to add to this, or?
I mean, I think Jake did a great job, and I just like applaud him and his team and the consultant team for, you know, all of the work they did and the process that they went through in order to accomplish this. You know, it was a lot of stakeholder engagement and meetings with the business owners as well as the developers to just kind of get all perspectives on what, you know, is needed and how they could accomplish what's needed on this corridor. So it was great. It was great to be a part of.
Great.
You, Commissioner.
Thank you for that. And again, it's another great example. We know that transportation has so much to do with economic development, business development. They all are combined, and we need to collaborate on all those efforts to move forward. So thanks, Jake, for that presentation. All right, let's go to our next part of our agenda. So as you may be aware, we sent you a link because of the EDD and WFRC compliance with the annual state requirements on training. You received a link to the open meetings video. Some of you probably already reviewed that. maybe some of you haven't. We're gonna ask you, if you haven't reviewed it, just to come and make sure that we're in compliance. You take a second, or actually 10 or 12 minutes after this meeting to review that. I've been through it several times. It's not that painful, so I'm sure you can get through it. And with that, just a brief reminder, we look forward to seeing you on June 12th of this year from 1:30 to 3 o'clock PM for our next meeting. If there's no other questions, we'll stand adjourned. And again, I think that, Andrea, that the people in the committee have that link, do they not?
Yes, and
For the
it'll
op-
also be, yeah, it will be included in the follow-up email with all the presentations and any other pertinent information. That
Good.
will
All right.
hopefully go out early next week.
All right, you'll see it then. Appreciate. Again, thanks for everybody for their time. Great presentations. I'm hoping everybody came away with a little bit more information they had prior to the meeting. So everybody have a great weekend.
Thanks, you
Thanks
guys.
very much. We stand adjourned.